Hi, I'm Kevin Frank. Welcome to Weather with Jeff for May 18th. Looking forward to update on what is, I think most of us in the state are really seeing dry conditions, and hopefully if we get any relief, we'll see it. So go ahead, Jeff, and take it away for us.
Well, thanks, Kevin, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on what time you're joining us. Two major themes here, and I think most people probably are aware here today. We have major changes in our weather. We're going to flip-flop from unusually cold and early spring type conditions here to midsummer, virtually in just a few days. The other major story that you'll follow here, it has to do is Kevin mentioned with water and the lack of it in certain parts of the state. And bottom line is, for many parts in the state, we're going to have to continue to deal with this at least for a while longer. There is some signs of hope here, not too far out though. But for the foreseeable future, we're going to be looking at onslaught or the arrival of summer in a quick fashion. And that's where I'm starting here on my title slide. It's a 3-for-1 today for you. And in the middle here, these are all forecast conditions as of this Friday morning, but big changes are coming, are actually underway as we speak here in the jet stream across North America. And in this pattern, right in the middle figure here, you can see that instead of that big trough that we've had stuck there for the last couple of weeks, and with all of the cold weather and night after night of frost freeze risk, it's been replaced now, or will be replaced, by a huge upper air ridge. So almost the exact meteorological opposite. And we're going to go from, again, abnormally cold to abnormally warm. And watch that. Well, keep that pattern in mind. We'll see that here when we look at the medium range again. But again, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to jet directly to summer with not much in between. On the lower left here, these are temperature anomalies, departures from normal for Friday morning. And you can see under that ridge that they're all much above normal. We will see temperatures by late in the week and into the early weekend anyway that are at least 15, if not 20 degrees Fahrenheit above where they should be. Typically for much of the state right now, climatologically, we would be looking at highs in about the low 70s or so, and then lows in the low 50s. And we're going to see at least 15 degrees better than that here over the short-term future. Now, on the lower right-hand side, this is a variable we don't look at very often here in this platform. The meteorologists look at this. This is a variable called precipitable water. And essentially what it is, it's looking at a column in the atmosphere and it's saying how much water vapor is in it. You might say, well, who cares, or why does that matter? And it matters because water vapor is the raw material of precip. And you've got to have it, of course, if you want to have precip. The second thing you want to have if you want to have precip, if you've got water vapor there, you have to lift it in the atmosphere to cool it down so that the water vapor can condense either into water or sublimate into ice. Again, both of those are necessary steps. But again, you've got to have both of those mechanisms. But first, you've got to have the water vapor. And I'll go back and look at the last several weeks, or even look at a couple months. And much of the dryness that we have over the region right now is a result of just not enough water vapor, not enough humidity in there, the raw material. We've had a lot of weather systems go through with fronts and lifting mechanisms, but just not enough water to work with. Well, that's changing. That is changing, and that's what this graphic here depicts. And what you can see is a very interesting situation here, where we've got this flow. The wind barbs are drawn in here in the grids, and you can see a massive influx of water vapor, of moisture off of the Gulf of Mexico, which is our primary source of moisture here in the Midwest, and it's headed north up into the Midwest. The problem is, and this is good in normal circumstances, because it is bringing some of that water vapor up here, and we're going to feel it. It's going to get humid. It's going to be muggy here even for the late in the week. But the problem now is that we don't have a well-defined lifting mechanism. So it's always, you have to have the two, and we've just seemed to be missing one of these pieces here for so long, for several weeks. So the moisture, the rainfall with this is going to be tantalizingly close in some cases, but unfortunately, this is not the answer or the end chapter of what's becoming a pretty significant drought here in Michigan. And I'll talk more about that in just a second. For the past week, though, we'll talk about the cold weather here, at least for a while. One more colder than normal week. Temperatures generally ranging from about 3 or 4 degrees below normal in northern parts of the state to as much as 6 or 7 in the south and west. Again, that with some of those last days of frost freeze risk. And it's changed quickly since then, since the weekend. Perhaps, again, the larger story, though, on the right-hand side here are precipitation totals. Another very dry week. Almost all the state less than 1/4 of an inch. That was almost the peak, but definitely drier than normal over not just all Michigan, but really over much of the Great Lakes region itself. So that continues the trend. The drier than normal trend, by the way, and we're starting to look at the statistics, in some cases actually goes back to the late summer, early fall of last year. But the core, the most intense dryness and the biggest departures from normal have typically come since the beginning of the calendar year, especially during late February, March, April, and then up to the present. So it's been a long-term stretch of drier than normal weather. Our degree day totals with the cooler than normal week, not surprisingly, were very, very limited. Our seasonal totals now with the March 1 start date range from less than 100 in northern portions of the state to about 370 in the southeastern lower, and that's the highest total we have. And similar to what we saw last week, again, there's a difference north to south across the state. We've now fallen a couple calendar days behind normal in the northern part of the state, but we still have a surplus of a few days in the far south, especially the southeastern part. So just depends on where you are, but much closer to normal than we have been for much of the season. Soil moisture, not surprisingly, given all the dry weather, continuing issue. And I've got 2 plots on here that are fairly up to date. This on the left-hand side, this is actually looking at the top 3 feet. So it's most of the rooting depth, certainly of the soil profile, more than we typically see for sod. But again, looking at that top 3 feet, the top meter, and this is plant available moisture. So what plants could potentially extract from the soil. And you can see that it's generally an issue with the browns here, 20, 30, 40% of normal, much lower than we typically see at this time of the year, but significantly better conditions than that in northern parts of the state, especially the Upper Peninsula and portions of the northern lower, and also now to our south, where some of the weather systems that have missed Michigan repeatedly over the last several weeks, actually the moisture has gotten as far as northern Indiana and Ohio, and you can see that reflected here in this graphic. On the right-hand side, this is a percentile looking at essentially the same variable, but saying where is the current value relative to the historical past. This particular product here that we're looking at from NASA has a relatively short period of record, only about 20 years, but still what it does say for the southern lower is that this is the driest it's been at this time of the year in the last 20 years. So that gives us some perspective. It's not as extreme. We've actually gone and done some homework and looked at the historical. There are some years back into the 1930s, for example, that were worse for the late winter and the spring season and dryness. But this one, at least in terms of the recent past, is pretty extreme in terms of lack of water. So it's not up in the top 5, but it's probably in the top 10% of driest situations that we've had at this time of the year over the last century. And the U.S. Drought Monitor here, a little bit of a change reflecting the weather system, not this past weekend, but the week before that went through and brought actually widespread rainfall across the Ohio Valley just to our south. There was also some precipitation that fell across northern lower. And as a result of that, we had areas in the northern lower and the extreme southern lower, which moved down from the D1 moderate drought status to the D0 abnormally dry. So they improved a little bit, at least temporarily, but as 67%, almost 2/3 of the state remains in the D1 or moderate drought category. And given the forecast, I suspect that we will probably see some changes in this week as well. It's not going to change overnight, though. On the weather forecast here, looking at the short term first, starting with conditions this morning, you can see lots of green here indicating showers and thunderstorms. This is that big slug of Gulf of Mexico moisture that we saw at the outset. It's been there now for the last 1 to 2 days. And if there were ever any doubt about what this water vapor is doing, if you've probably seen the news footage from down along the Gulf Coast, heavy, in some cases, flooding rainfall. More than 10 inches of rain fell in portions of southeastern Texas, southwestern Louisiana yesterday. So again, all that water vapor A lot of it's falling before it gets up to the upper Midwest. But with southerly winds, the airflow is going to take that moisture northward up into the Midwest. And again, it's going to be close. I think that portions of western upper Michigan will definitely see some of this moisture, but for much of the state, especially for the eastern half of the lower, I think it's going to be watching off to the west and longing for the precip, but it probably will not get there. But by tomorrow morning, you can see the first major piece of that does make it up into the upper Midwest, and that's going to be our best chance for any rainfall here over the short term. Beginning during the day tomorrow in most spots and continuing through the day into the evening, maybe even into the overnight hours, again, in the far northwestern part of the state. But this is not going to be a widespread rain, and it's going to probably be on the light side. Most areas, we're talking maybe about a 40, maybe a 50% chance of precipitation. And even where it falls, I'm guessing a quarter of an inch or less. So yes, it's something. I looked at my own records here in Hazlet. It's been since the 11th of April since I've had more than half an inch here locally. That's a long time. And again, statistically quite unusual to see that. But this is not going to be the system that ends that dryness. So really over the next 24 hours is our best chance for anything. There is going to be also with this, I think there's going to be a very distinctive west to east pattern. Certainly higher chances for rainfall and higher amounts as you go westward in the state, and especially for the western half of upper Michigan. Areas to our west, out over the upper Mississippi Valley, probably will do fairly well with this particular system, but it's just not going to make it this far east, unfortunately. By Thursday morning, a little bit of a change, still under strong southerly flow. The other big noticeable here, we're going to see a very, very distinct increase in humidity at low levels. Our dew point temperatures are going to go up into the 60s by late tomorrow and into Thursday and stay there for the rest of the week. Our air temperatures are also going to surge from, well, they've been in the 70s here over the last day or two. We will be into the well into the 80s by Thursday. And then Friday and Saturday, we could even see some southern parts of the state approach maybe 90 for high temperatures. So very, very summer-like. Low temperatures also increasing from the 50s. We actually had some upper 40s here overnight this morning, but it'll be several degrees warmer than that tomorrow. And they'll be up into the 60s by the end of the week and in the weekend. So we'll be really piling up some degree day units here over the next several days, especially as we get into the weekend. But again, the precip, we're going to see it on the map, and a lot of it's going to be off to our west, but most of that will not be able to make it this far into Michigan. After tomorrow, for most of the state, the next chance for rainfall, I think, of anything serious, there might be a few scattered showers here or there, but nothing widespread. The next chance for anything, though, more organized, probably not until late Sunday or better yet, or better bet on Monday of next week. That would be, so it's several days. And then beyond that, it looks a little bit better in terms of maybe more chances for precipitation. I'll show you that in the medium range just in a moment. I mentioned the temperatures. Here are forecast high temperatures here for this Friday. You can see that most of those range from the low 80s in the north to the upper 80s in the south. So again, and that's pretty far up there for the third, fourth week in May. Climatologically, at least 15 degrees above normal. Friday and Saturday probably will be the warmest days. A couple degrees cooler than that as we move into the weekend, especially on Sunday. The other issue relative to water, with warmer temperatures, we're going to see a surge in our potential evapotranspiration rates, and I put that in there because it's been very, very limited with the very, very cool, dry conditions we've had over the last 2 weeks. Very, very limited evaporation, only a few hundredths per day, typically, much lower than normal. We're gonna jump quickly to above normal levels, and we will see levels typically in the 1/1500ths to 2/10 of an inch per day range. A little bit higher than that on Friday and Saturday. We might have some areas approach a quarter of an inch. So that would be a strong full summer day types worth of again of water. This is demand. So if you're watering and keeping up, it's going to definitely increase here significantly over the next several days. How much precip in the gauge between now and next Tuesday, 1 week out, and well, the long and the short of that is not enough. You can see though very distinctly. Look at off to our west with large areas expecting an inch or more of precip. That's that plume coming on. And it's just not far enough east. It does, though, include portions again of western upper Michigan. That's the best bet for rainfall in the state here over the next several days. But as you go east and south towards especially southeastern lower Michigan, once again, less than a quarter of an inch. And you add on top of those warmer temperatures, we will obviously see probably more in the way of impacts than we have over the last 2 weeks due to the cool weather, because now we're going to be just the opposite with warm and dry. In the medium range time frame, a jet stream here, it looks a lot like what you saw at the first slide there, with a ridge right over the Great Lakes area, and then a big trough out over the west. And that pattern is expected to continue. Note that there's still this split flow, and this split flow of the jet stream is related to why we have been seeing so much dry weather in, well, all the way from the northern plains on over into the Great Lakes region. We're in between two of these major branches of the jet stream, and there's just less of the moisture, less of the weather systems that lead to the precipitation than we typically would have. But with this pattern, one difference here is that the southern branch, the subtropical branch here, is more active than it has been. And as a result of that, even though the forecast, both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 day outlooks strongly call for above normal mean temperatures, they also both call for above normal precipitation totals. Now, you may say, well, you've said this before. We have seen the guidance before. And so we'll put a caveat there with that and just say, well, maybe we'll believe it when we see it. But the model guidance still does suggest repeatedly and fairly consistently that there will be more frequent chances of precip, especially moving into that last 10 days or so of the month here coming. So the later next week and then the week beyond that. So we might actually pick up some more meaningful precipitation then. At least that's what the forecast guidance is saying. So with that, I'll wrap things up here and just say we're going from late spring to midsummer, virtually just in a few days, certainly with temperatures, but unfortunately, given the dryness, not a lot of change in that, at least in the short term. Looks a little bit better in the medium term. After tomorrow, the next chance for anything significant precip-wise, I think, again, not till the end of the weekend or probably the early part of next week. So big changes here, and probably, given the dryness, probably going to see a lot more in the way of impact, given where we've been. Now I'll stop there and see if there are any questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. So at least in the 10 to 14 day, we're going to continue with at least models telling us higher temperatures, but also possibly above normal precipitation, which I think
Right.
would be key.
And it's been consistent, but it's also, it's been incorrect. And we've seen that before, and it just didn't happen, especially over the southern half of the state. We did get precip, notably in northern lower and the UP. UP has done fine for water, for precipitation, but it's been the southern half over and over. And some of it's bad luck and bad timing, but that area has just, I can count at least 3 weather systems that have been very promising and led to significant precip everywhere except over southern lower Michigan. And that's one of the things you don't see. Nature doesn't repeat itself that way too often. So we'll cross fingers and hope that guidance is right. We obviously do need the water, and it is climatologically, historically, it is significant. It's relative to where we should be. It's pretty far below.
Especially this time of year, I think that, I mean, we always talk about, Michigan goes from winter to summer in a hurry.
Yeah.
This week seems to be a perfect example. Where last week, I think we were in the highs in the 50s. Now you're talking close to 90.
Yeah.
And the lack of water, I think, especially residential or landscape turf, if they don't have irrigation systems, you're going to start to see that really showing up. And even golf courses that manage annual bluegrass putting greens, which generally have another short root system, is going to be quite the stress to go from those cool temperatures at love to now midsummer.
Right, and the other, for people, I suspect this is going to be the first major string of probably the desire, if not the need for air conditioning.
Yeah, we'll see if our air conditioner works now this week.
Right, need to do a test drive.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. We will see you next week. Thank you.
See you next week.